Jay Bilas, welcome to the Leadership Classroom. Thanks for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Let's go back to Rolling Hills. California public school kid, before Duke, before ESPN. What shaped your ambition most in those early years?
God, I hope I had ambition when I was in my early years. I grew up in a normal family, always wanted to do well. But I think as I got toward high school, I got a little more focused on what was important to me. And my parents always, especially my mother, always encouraged me to do things other than sports. So I participated in a lot of things that were outside of my comfort zone, and turned out those were, excuse me, really helpful to me. But I think my parents, my siblings excelled at whatever they did, and I think my parents expected all of us to do our best. We weren't, we weren't held to a certain standard. It wasn't like if you didn't get an A+ in one of your classes, you were looked down upon. But I was asked quite a bit, was that the best you could do? And usually when you're asked that, you kind of think, well, maybe there's another gear I need to hit.
I so appreciate, Jay, that you just said, was that the best that you could do? Because when you think back to your childhood, clearly that is something that has stuck with you over the years. When you consider the way that your parents raised you, thinking about that phrase right there, what did they teach you about work and success and kind of building upon one success to another?
Neither one of my parents had the opportunity to go to college. They both worked when they were young, and so I got a chance to watch my dad work a lot, and that made a big impact on me. And my dad didn't want me to have a job when I was young. A lot of my friends had part-time jobs when we were in high school, and that was not something my dad wanted me to do. My mom wanted me to get one, but my dad, that was really one of the only times I ever saw my dad kind of contradict my mother. He said, all his job is go to school and play ball. And if he can't handle that, then he can get another job. Then he can go get a job. But I think my dad, you know, his thing was do what's in front of you. And, I do remember pretty specifically one time my dad didn't come to a lot of my games when I was younger, but when I was in high school, he came to pretty much every game. His business was not far from where we lived, and he was able to, get off work and come see me play. And I had not played particularly well in one of the games that he saw, and he said, "Was something bothering you?" I said, "Yeah, I was thinking about all these other things." And he said, "It's okay for you to think about nothing but basketball while you're playing, and there's nothing you can do about anything else." And he said, "But when it's over, you need to move on to the next thing. And it doesn't do you any good to think about the game while you're in class. Doesn't do you any good to think about school or basketball while you're out with your friends. Enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it, and concentrate on it, and then move on to the next thing." And his thing was, he was a really hard worker, but he wasn't a multitasker. He got a lot of stuff done in one day, but he didn't try to do two things at once. And that made an impact on me. Like, concentrate on what you're doing, get it done, and then do the next thing. And I've always kind of tried to do that in my own life.
Jay, you mentioned the fact that your parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And I wonder how much more of an emphasis they placed on education in your life. And you talked about you don't have to have the A+, but at the same point, I wonder how much their inability to go to college and make that happen drove the way they raised you and the impact that education had on you personally.
Yeah, education was a big deal in our
Yeah.
our household. It wasn't like we were required to, you know, seek out all these intellectual pursuits or things like that. I'm not suggesting that. But when I was going to school, I was expected to get my work done and to do well. And my mom used to say this all the time. She would say, college of your choice, that you need to get the secondary education such that you can go to the college of your choice. And that really came to a head when I started being recruited to play basketball. About the around my sophomore year of high school, it was pretty clear, at least to me, that I was going to go to college on a scholarship, and I was going to get to choose where I went to school. But that really didn't change my mother's view of my schoolwork. And I think it was my junior year in college. I was taking the SAT, And like a young person does, I'd kind of gone out with my friends the night before the exam, and I didn't do as well as my mother expected. So when I got the number back, I was happy with it, because I knew I can go anywhere with that. You combine that with basketball, I'm good. And my mom said she told me I needed to take it again, and I said I can go anywhere with that. And she's like, you can't go to the college of your choice. You can't go to an Ivy League school with that. And I was kind of a smart aleck. I said, oh, yes, I can, and I'll bet you. And so I actually let in an Ivy League school for a home visit that I had no intention of attending, just to say that I could go there, because I made a deal with my mom. If they say this gets in, I don't have to take it again. And they said it was good enough, and she had steam coming out of her ears because she didn't think it was good enough.
Do you remember the score, Jay?
I do remember the score.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think it was an 1170 or something like that,
Okay.
and she thought it needed to be 12 something, and I was like, 1170 is fine with me.
Good enough for an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
Well, with basketball, it wouldn't have
Sure.
been good eno and now, I mean, I think the scoring has changed.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the number was,
Went up to
1,300 back
2,400,
then.
then back to 1,600. Yeah, so I think we're
Something
back in
like that. I
1,600
can't remember what
territory.
it
Yeah.
was, but it was fine. And especially given what I had done the night before, I thought it was a Herculean effort.
Jay, you talked about college of your choice, and you were a lifelong UCLA fan, but they didn't recruit you seriously. You ended up committing to Duke because of the coach, Mike Krzyzewski, because, as you said, you liked him the most. What was it specifically about Coach K that drew you to him?
That's a good question. I think he was really, genuine and honest. Of the coaches I came down to, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I really didn't care so much about the school as much as I did the coach. I did not have a great experience with my high school coach, and I was not going to when I got to choose who I played for, I didn't get to choose my high school coach, and I got to choose my college coach, and I was not gonna make a mistake. So I came down to 4 coaches, and Coach K was one of them. He was the least well-known, the least accomplished, and the least experienced, but he was the one that ultimately I liked the best. And, look, I knew what to say when you were asked by media back then of, yeah, Duke's a great academic school and blah, blah, blah. But because I didn't want to say I'm going there because of the coach. If he had been at any other of these other schools, I would have gone to the other schools. If he were a junior college coach, I would have gone there. But I really liked him, and I think it came down to a feeling more than anything that this guy's honest and he's a straight shooter. I couldn't tell. Like I'm not going to sit here and say as a 17, 18-year-old kid, I go, okay, well, he can X and O better than this guy, or he runs a better practice than this guy. I didn't know that, but I had a great feeling about who he was, and how invested he was in me. And I think I was right. I mean, I think I would have done well under any of the 4 that I had come down to. In fact, I stayed in touch with all of them, and 2 of them still. One Lute Olson was, I guess, runner up, if you will. He was at Iowa back then. He's since passed away, but I stayed in very close touch with all of them.
You were on some really good Duke teams in the early to mid 80s, Jay. And I remember when you committed, Duke wasn't the powerhouse that it is now, right? And yet, when you look at those Duke squads, certainly weren't the most talented player on the team. You've said as much. You had guys like Tommy Amaker. You had really really talented players, and yet, Jay, you were the glue guy. I wonder, from your perspective, how do you lead when you're not the star, the superstar, the most talented person on the team?
I guess the answer to that is that there are different levels of leadership, and
Sure.
everyone on a team has to assume responsibility, one for their area. And it probably goes to what Bill Belichick with the Patriots was well known for, which was do your job. And I know there was a sign, or at least I've heard there was a sign in their facility that said just that: "Do your job." What the only thing I would add to that, not to be presumptuous, but I think what helped us as a team was the fact that we each did our job, but we helped our teammates do their job too. That it went beyond just your own individual responsibilities. That we were responsible um, for our assignment, but we were accountable to the team for the mission of the team winning. And so we were very competitive in practice, and sometimes that competitive dynamic in practice was, look, I'm working to solidify my spot on this team. Like I want to earn these minutes, and if I earn minutes, that means you don't get to play as much. But whatever the decision the coaching staff made on minutes, on who played, who started, who played more, I think all of us were willing to accept the consequences of competition and then move forward together, and not sit there, if you're on the bench for a while, not sit there hoping the guy in front of you screwed up so you can go back in. It wasn't that kind of environment. And I think Coach K was the one that, and the coaching staff, that created that atmosphere. Um, but the players had to be willing to submit to it, if you will. And we had great guys. We were all really different personalities. We all came from different areas of the country and had different backgrounds and experiences. But once we put the uniform on, we all, for the most part, I mean, we had fights and everything like everybody does, every family, but we pulled in the same direction. And I think everybody on the team was legitimately happy when others experienced success, because that meant that the overall was going to be that much better.
Jay, you're the author of a New York Times bestseller, Toughness, a book that started as an article for ESPN. What does toughness look like to you?
To me, so there are a lot of different ways to define it, and that's why I wrote the book, because it had never really been defined. It was something that coaches talked about, and teachers and the like, and leaders talked about being tough, but it was never really defined for me. It's kind of like being a great teammate. When people tell you be a great teammate, well, what does that mean? How do you do that? And I saw toughness every day growing up with my dad. He's probably the toughest guy I've ever been around. I think I experienced it with Coach K. Um, I think I think a big part of it is your concentration on what's important and what your priorities are. I wound up defining a tough player as easy to play with and hard to play against. That to me was a tough player, and didn't mean you had to be a big bully, but you were able to handle success and failure and move on from each and continue to persevere. And I think you were tough enough to prepare, and tough enough that when you were going to compete, and this is actually a big thing for me now, as I've learned more about it. A lot of people refer to themselves as competitors. They say, I'm a competitor. And yet, after they lose a game, they behave inappropriately, and they rationalize the inappropriate behavior by saying, well, I'm a competitor. Well, the way I look at it, if you're a true competitor, and I'm not saying I was, but if you're a true competitor, you go into a competition knowing that you can lose, and you're willing to accept the consequences of losing. So once the game, my dad really drilled this into me. He was not good with not being a good sport after a game. So if I were upset after a game that I had lost or not played well, and my attitude was affecting others around me, his thing was, well, what are you acting like that for? Game's over. Like, don't give me this competitor stuff. Game's over. If you wanted to win, you should have taken that attitude more into the game. Game's over. Nothing to compete for now. So don't ruin the rest of our day because you're not happy with the result. That made a big impact on me.
I love the stories about your dad, Jay, and there's one story in particular that you shared with the Duke team this previous season. And you talk about working for him one summer, you're climbing up a ladder, you're carrying too much, and then you fall. And what stuck with me is what your dad said to you, which is you can't get to the top in one step, but you can fall in one. What did that moment teach you about patience and growth? And did you recognize it even in that moment?
Maybe not in that particular moment, but I thought about it a lot. It stuck with me. My dad wanted me. He was a very much of a blue collar worker, and he's a TV repairman. Had his own TV sales and service business, and when he made money, he would buy real estate. So he would buy like a commercial building or something like that. And then around the time I was in high school, I worked for him during the summertime, doing construction work on some of his properties. And so this one summer, I had to, when I get to the work site early, part of my job was to get the materials up to the roof of a, single story commercial building. And being 17 years old or 18, in my infinite wisdom, that I thought, hey, if I carry more stuff, I have to take fewer trips. I get this ridiculous job over with. I hated doing that. And I overloaded myself one time, and each time I tell the story, I'm higher up on the ladder to make it sound like a bigger deal. I got partway up the ladder and I lost my balance and I fell flat on my back. And it was one of those things where, you know, as parents, when you see your kid maybe get hurt, you're scared. So my dad was worried I was really hurt. And then when he found out I wasn't hurt, then he was mad. And he kind of got on me about, he said, "Will you concentrate on what you're doing?" And then he said, "You can't get to the top of that ladder in one step. You can get to the bottom in one step. Like, concentrate on what you're doing." And his thing was basically, "Look, you have a job to do here. Your job is to get this stuff up to the top. And if you're lying flat on your back and we have to take care of you and you got to go to the hospital or something, then you got a bunch of guys that aren't working. So what are you doing?" And the other thing he said on I think it was my first day working. We were going to the job site and we stopped at a little diner to grab a bite to eat beforehand. It was like 6 in the morning. And he said, "Hey, before we get there, what job is too small for you to do?" And and I got the message pretty quick that whatever you're asked to do, do it, and don't say anything. Like, you're low man on the totem pole here. And if you want to earn your way up to doing, jobs you consider to be more important, then do the ones we give you and do them right. His thing was, let's not do something we have to do again. Like, do it right the first time. And if you got a question, ask it. But let's not go in there thinking that, hey, you're the boss's kid. You're going to get to do more than you're capable of doing. If there's a task that's too small for you, then don't show up.
Jay, you talked earlier about some of those great Duke teams that you were part of, and as great as they were, you guys still fought each other. But you also talked about being accountable to the team winning, and I'm interested to know, what does accountability look like between people who care about each other or have to care about each other?
That's a great question, because accountability, I think a lot of players, before the accountability is kind of defined, or at least they learn it through going through experiences. In our society, accountability usually means blame. That when something goes wrong, well, who's accountable for that? Like, who's going to get fired? Who's going to get blamed? And I don't think that, in the context that we're talking about it, I don't think that's what accountability means. I think accountability is living up to the standard that we have all agreed we are going to meet individually and as a team. That, we're going to be on time. We're going to work hard together to reach this common goal. And, you can tend, sometimes you go to practice, and I think as young players, at least I did this, you're thinking about getting through practice instead of, what am I going to get from this? You want to be able to throw everything you have into what you're doing that day. And the coaches will moderate your effort level, and close off practice. They'll end practice if it gets to be too much, or you're working too hard. tried to pace myself early on through practice, and I learned later on not to do that. That was a huge mistake. But that's part of the learning experience. But I think being accountable means, hey, this is the job. This is what I'm expected to do, and I need to do it. And I need to do it without excuse. And not just the excuses that you make to other people. But I think at least in my experience, I was pretty good early on at making excuses to myself and kind of excusing, well, this is why this happened. I didn't feel well, or this, I could blame it on a lot of things instead of nope, like you either do it or you don't do it. And after games, maybe early on, I wasn't as good at this, but later on, I got better at not beating myself up over it. That okay, we didn't do what we wanted to do in this game. Why not? And then try to fix it and not let those kind of things happen again, or improve upon whatever preparation we needed to do or execution. That you're not just it's not just a beat yourself up thing. And that goes for coaches too. That in film sessions, like, do you want your players learning from film, or do you want them feeling bad about themselves and then reluctant to take a risk because they don't want to be put in that position again? I did have that happen where I got chewed out pretty good in practice one day, and one of the assistants, a guy named Bob Bender, who later on coached in the NBA, he came up and said, "You're hiding out there. Like, don't do that." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "You're just doing enough so you don't get yelled at again." And he said, like, "Put yourself out there. Like, don't hide." And he was right. I was kind of hiding so that I I didn't catch the wrath again.
Jay, you've said that the most important aspect, the most important trait in leadership is empathy. And I really like that. I wonder, from your perspective, why you feel everything with leadership starts with empathy.
I believe that if you don't have empathy for the others that you are going through the experience with, and that doesn't that extends to, if you're a coach, to those in your charge, or if you're a player, to your teammates. You can all be on the same bus going to the same destination, but you're not all necessarily taking the same trip. And people are going through different things at different times. And I think as best you can, you need to be aware of that. And you need to be aware of what your teammates are going through so you can help. And because that's really what you want to do as a teammate, is be there for your other teammates. And, if you have a player that's going through a difficult time, or struggling to get better, struggling to going through something on the floor or off the floor, how can you help? And if you're not aware of that, I think it puts you at a disadvantage, and puts your team at a disadvantage. Everybody has feelings, and they're motivated and inspired by different things. And that's why I think for Coach K, he didn't treat all of us the same. We were all treated differently, but we were all treated fairly, but we were all treated differently. Some players he got on more than others. I don't know in every instance whether it's because they could take it and the others couldn't, or some others couldn't. That's part of it, I do believe. But I think being able to put yourself in your colleagues, or your teammates' shoes, is an important aspect of being a great teammate.
Jay, you've been vocal about the NCAA player competition fairness in collegiate athletics, even when it hasn't necessarily been popular. Where does that courage come from?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily courage. I think when I was in college, I was on an NCAA committee as an athlete representative. It was the NCAA's long range planning committee, and I'm sure the NCAA regretted that years later that they let me behind the curtain to see what policy was made. But I didn't really appreciate all of it, frankly. I thought some of the NCAA policies regarding athletes were wrong. I thought they were unfair. And while I loved the administrators I worked with, and was very appreciative and remain so today, of how well they treated me, and how great of mentors they were. Back then we were token representatives, if you will. We were listened to, but not taken as seriously as I felt we should have been. And I felt like an enterprise that makes that much money, and yet restricts only one segment of the business, that being the athlete, had some questions to answer. And as I went forward and got into broadcasting and was no longer kind of a part of the machine in that way, I didn't feel like I should stay silent on it when matters of policy were discussed, because I felt like I understood it and I had a point of view, and I just wanted to make it heard. And I researched it. I felt I was well educated in it, and I wanted my perspective to be part of the discussion. Now, look, do I think that what I said 20, 30 years ago turned out to be right? I do, but it's not that big of a deal. I'm not here with pom poms cheering for it. It's just I just felt like I've always felt like if another student at my school or at your school could be on scholarship and go out and make money in their chosen field, why can't I do that as an athlete? Just because I play ball doesn't mean that those doors should be closed to me when they're open to everyone else. And it not only in the college space, but in our society. You can't point to anyone that isn't allowed to be compensated in a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. There isn't anybody except for college athletes, and I'm grateful that that's changing for today's athlete, and they can experience making money that could be a really positive influence in their lives.
Mike Krzyzewski, all-time winningest coach in men's basketball history. He's been written about, he's been talked about, he's been analyzed endlessly. What do people still overlook about Coach K as a leader?
One, how funny he is. He's actually incredibly funny. But I think his of all his amazing attributes, and there's so many, maybe the best one is how deeply he thinks about uh, the relationship dynamic of a team, how the pieces fit together, how the relationship among the players affects the overall team dynamic and team play. And he was always big on your attitude, your body language, how you related to one another, and coached it, and taught it day to day. Uh, he and one of the great things about Coach K, of the many great things, is he really wanted you to go out and be ultra successful in whatever, and he was willing to help you not only become a better player, but in whatever field of endeavor you were choosing, he wanted to help, and made that really clear that it wasn't just a on court relationship that you had. It was whatever he could do to help you attain whatever goals you had or whatever path you had. He was going to help you do it. Um,
And
I
he helped
always
you get
really
into
appreciate that.
broadcasting. He
What's
helped you
that?
get into broadcasting too.
Yeah, I mean, he greased the skids for everything I did. I never. I think now, after 30 years in broadcasting, people tend to say, "Well, it's something he always wanted to do," and I guess there's some truth to that. But what really happened was when I was in high school and started to become a recognized player, newspapers would want to do a story on you. And back then, at least, I got the question a lot of, well, what do you want to do after basketball? And the truth is, I didn't have a very good answer. And so I had said, back then, like Frank Gifford had left football and become a broadcaster, and Don Drysdale did the same in baseball, and Jim Palmer, people like that. So I had said, maybe broadcasting. And I really didn't have any basis to say that, but I said it a few times. And coaches that recruited me saw that, and that became a basis for recruiting me, that, hey, we've got a communications program. We can help you with that, things like that, to try to attract me as a player. And Coach K was the one that, when I decided to go to Duke, he introduced me to a guy named Chuck Howard, who was a producer with ABC Sports. And I started working for ABC Sports during the summertime as a production assistant. And Coach K did that. And when I voiced that I wanted to go to law school, I had applied to Duke while I was playing professional basketball in Italy, and I wound up getting accepted, and Coach K offered me a coaching job, and that was all related. I didn't know at the time that he was kind of pulling strings like that, and we've never really talked about it. It's not like he said, "Hey, I did this now." It's just what I've figured out that I said I wanted to go to law school, and he helped me make it happen, and I did it through being a graduate assistant for him. So I'd express an interest in coaching. All of a sudden, I'm on his coaching staff. I'd express an interest in law school, and then I'm going to law school while I'm coaching and working for him. So that all happened because of my relationship with him and because of things that he knew I wanted to do. And he's done this, not just me, he's done that with everybody. Not everybody can, be a grad assistant on his staff or things like that. But yeah, I've always been really grateful that he took that interest in my interests and worked to help me make those things happen.
And Jay, you mentioned earlier that Coach K didn't treat all of you the same, but he treated you fairly, something universal there. He was known for pushing his players relentlessly, but never in a way that cut down on their character. What can educational leaders, not just here in California, but throughout the country, take from that kind of leadership, being demanding, but grounded in dignity?
Yeah, I think Tony Dungy had a saying that I read in his book that I've stolen because I think it's brilliant. That and I think it goes for any leadership position. You can be demanding without being demeaning. That it doesn't need to get there have been a lot of coaches that I've been around and played for that when they're making corrections, that the correction goes to your character somehow, that you're not a good enough whatever to have done this, or it goes to your very being instead of, hey, you made a mistake here, or this needs to be better. How do you do that? And it's not about volume. Some people think it's about yelling. You can scream the most uplifting thing and be at the highest volume, but you can also whisper the most demeaning thing, and your player or your colleague will never forget it. Like I've never forgotten anything a coach has said to me. Um, the ones that were more uplifting, and it doesn't always have to be like a put your arm around the guy and say something uplifting. It can be in difficult times and in a very challenging way. But I've always looked at coaching and leadership, whatever, however you want to call it, as really you're trying to help someone, and you're trying to help someone achieve a goal and an individual goal and a common goal. So when you can do that and inspire, it's not just motivating because all of us were motivated. I don't think you reach that level without being a motivated athlete or a motivated competitor, motivated whatever. But Coach K really inspired us to want to do more for our team, ourselves, for him. And there were certainly times where, like, I remember, I think we were playing North Carolina. We came back to a huddle, really tense situation, and he kind of looked at all of us, said, "Isn't this fun?" And we were like, "Yeah," but he was right. Like it was somewhere we'd always wanted to be, and he didn't let us forget that. Like this is fun. There's nothing to be worried about. Like we may lose, but we're not going to lose because we're afraid to lose. We're going to go for it. If somebody beats us, great. But and he was one of those guys that said, "Hey, we give 100% effort. You're not going to hear a word from me." I do remember giving 100% effort, and still hearing a word from him. But I think it was pretty much true that look, you go after this and don't be afraid to make a mistake. If we do make a mistake, move on to the next play. We'll analyze this stuff later. And I think we accomplished more because of that, because we knew he was there to support us, not there as the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner of our performance, if that makes sense. He was certainly going to hold us to the standard that we needed to be held to, but it wasn't like do this or else type stuff. I never felt that, if that makes any sense.
As we mentioned at the top, Jay, you are a California public school grad. I wonder what you make of the state of public education in our country right now.
I'm probably not qualified to answer that. As a parent, we sent our kids to private school because the public schools in our area, there had been some legal cases that threw the entire busing situation in Charlotte, North Carolina into chaos when our kids were about to start school. And we were public school advocates. No, I'm a public school product. Went to
Right.
public school until I went to college, and so that's what we wanted, but we felt like we couldn't take the risk at that time, and we could afford not to. Um, my only thing with education is the same as it would be in coaching is, uh, like the whole reason to be in the education business is to help young people and to help them achieve whatever their hopes and dreams are. And certainly you have a foundation level of education and a curriculum that you have agreed to that you want to hit and certain things you want to teach. There are certain foundational principles that are non-negotiables. But outside of that, when you can take young people that are all different, they may be at different stages of their development. Some are ultra high achievers from the jump, others reach that later. And maybe they won't get it while they've got you. You know, that happens. And it happens with players, it happens with students, it happens with workers, colleagues, whatever. They may not get what you're selling at the time, but they will later. And what you do and how you do it will affect them for the rest of their lives. And I think you have to, I think all of us have to be mindful that what we do and say uh, is meaningful. And just because they don't get it now doesn't mean they're not going to get it in the future, and they're not going to look back on this and this is really going to be meaningful to them. It's not a referendum on your ability to teach or coach right now. The referendum comes at the very end when they look back and say, was this person a positive influence in my life? That to me is the measure.
Jay, in your work with ESPN, you cover both college and professional athletics. Is there a leader in the game today, coach or player, college or professional, who makes you think, I like the way this particular person leads?
Oh yeah. Oh, there are tons of them. Of the, I could throw out a bunch of names like Tom Izzo and Kelvin Sampson and names like that. But of the younger coaches, there's a coach at Iowa State named TJ Otzelberger that to me, if I could sort of use one coach as an example, a younger coach, TJ would be the one I would use. That you go to practice every day with TJ and you're going to have high standards. But at the same time, in a game when some coaches lose their minds on the officials and everything's a crisis and all that stuff, that's not TJ. I mean, he keeps control of his emotions because I think his philosophy, and we've talked about this a little bit, his philosophy is how can I ask my players to keep their emotions in check and concentrate on what they're doing without regard to the officials or the crowd if I'm not doing it? I have to be doing it. I have to be that example for them. And I think he does a magnificent job of that. The professional level is a little bit different because the players are older. But Steve Kerr would be of the Golden State Warriors to me would be the ultimate example of having a system and having really high standards, but at the same time being very appreciative of how hard this is of what the players are doing. And he's out there to help them accomplish it and to, keep them in the right mindset as best he can. But I've not met anybody that I think is a better leader than Steve Kerr is, both on and off the floor.
Funny you say that, Jay, because when I was writing that question, the name I thought you were going to say was Steve Kerr.
Well, and I don't think it takes a genius to figure that out. When you look, and not that you're not a genius, but for me,
Thanks, Jay.
that Steve and we're contemporaries. He graduated college 2 years after I did. We grew up in pretty much the same area of Los Angeles. He went to Pacific Palisades High School, and Steve went through. He was a great player in college. And he was a longtime pro in the NBA and a multi-time champion. But he's ultra competitive. But he doesn't let that competitive nature. As soon as the game's over, that part of it's over. And I think does a great job of acknowledging um, uh, how difficult the job is that his players are undertaking. And Coach K does that too. I think very respectful of the fact that, hey, I'm asking you to do something that's really difficult, and I realize you got a guy like when I was playing, you're guarding a guy who's 7'2" and who's really good. Like I get it that this is not what I'm asking you to do is not easy. Nobody said it was easy, but I think you can do it, and he expected you to do it.
Jay, we've taken way too much of your time. You're so generous to spend some time with us. So grateful for everything you've had to say today and just what you've brought to the game of basketball. Jay Bilas, our guest here on the Leadership Classroom. Jay, thanks so much for the time. Looking forward to catching
Thanks,
up.
Jay.
On the road.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be with you.